Absolutely. I think it's really great. I think there's a lot of great information out there and a lot of people working in the industry. So I think this is really wonderful.
Oh, thank you. So education. Share with me your educational background.
Sure. So I actually, my undergraduate background is in neuroscience and English literature. I was a double major, so I love to read, but my first love was definitely the science field. And in undergrad, I had plans of going pre-med. And up until about my senior year of college, I was definitely looking towards going to medical school until I shadowed a physician and saw, what the life of a resident is. So it's a huge commitment, and we really appreciate the people that go into the medical field. But it didn't really align with some of the things that I wanted out of life. And so I found myself in a position of, well, what do I do next? And so I didn't want to jump into a graduate degree program right away. So I started exploring other fields that I could go into after graduation that would allow me to use my science degree. And then eventually, while working and having kids, I did eventually go back to get my master's in public health a few years ago, and I was really glad that I did that.
Okay, awesome. So as you were searching and trying to figure out, okay, what outside of medical school, because I was there too. I was just like you, pre-med, biology, chemistry. I knew that was it for me. But then like you, once I started shadowing physicians and learning more, I was like, I definitely do not want to live this lifestyle. So, as you were searching and kind of identifying alternatives, what led you to public health?
So I eventually, I actually grew up outside of the DC area in the DMV, and there's a lot of government jobs there, and the research industry and the public health field has a big presence there. So I started looking into entry-level positions that I could go into and use my science degree. And I actually ended up applying for a lot of positions outside the DC area. And I just wasn't getting any kind of callbacks for interviews, or just wasn't making it very far in the interview process. I actually originally wanted to be a clinical research coordinator. But eventually I actually landed a position as a research assistant on a NCI-NIH contract with a CRO. And that position really opened up the possibilities of working in the clinical research field and also going into public health.
Oh, nice. So at this point, were you kind of just applying and seeing what kind of offers you got, or did you have like a clear cut strategy at this point?
Yeah, actually, when I was applying, it was shortly after the 2008 financial crisis. And at that point, I was just looking for a job that I could use my degree with. And I sort of fell into a research assistant position. And it was my first introduction to research. I didn't know much about clinical research or public health at that time. I didn't have much exposure to it in undergrad. In undergrad, I was very clearly pre-med focused. I didn't realize that there were other opportunities out there. Mm-hmm. But I was excited to be on the project, and I did do a lot of on-the-job learning and training. There's definitely a lot of background and information in the field of clinical research, especially. And I was really appreciative to get that exposure early on to a lot of the things that are really important in the field of clinical research and that entry-level position.
Nice. And then this is kind of off on a tangent, but I keep hearing it's kind of like a reoccurring theme that no one really knew about clinical research, and they kind of fell into the role, or, they just randomly so happen to meet this person or talk to that person, and they kind of, discovered it. It wasn't like they were specifically looking for the field. So Why do you think that is? Could you share a little bit more about your specific situation? Like for me, I come from a background where neither one of my parents went to, well, my mom went to college for a little bit, but neither one of them graduated from college. And it was just kind of the only successful medical, profession was to be a doctor or a nurse. And that was it.
Mhm.
And then, like you have the lawyer and then, perhaps a teacher. But those are kind of like the only successful routes that were pretty much well known in my area. And I grew up in, it's the metro Atlanta area, specifically Conyers, Georgia. And that was it. Like no one ever mentioned clinical research at all. I didn't even find out until graduate school. So could you share a little bit more about, your personal story and perhaps, your opinion as to why it's such a mystery?
Sure. Yeah, I think for me, I was in a similar position. I thought, well, I like science. So what are my options? I could be a doctor or work in a research lab. Um, and I knew research lab was not for me. I actually have some friends from college who went on to go do like a PhD or work in a lab. And for me, the granular level of detail that's required for lab research is important, but I had so many interests and so many other things I wanted to explore. So it was hard for me to kind of nail that down. And for my background, my dad is an engineer. So has always been heavy science based, and he didn't know a whole lot about clinical research either. And my mother is a social worker. And so she always has loved working with people. And so I knew I wanted to do something that kind of balanced those two influences in my life, working with people, something more people oriented versus maybe lab oriented. And really coming across clinical research in that same way, stumbling upon it because I realized, hey, I have a science background and interest in this. This is something I might be qualified for. Let me at least learn more. Mm-hmm. And I do think there is a huge gap in educating people about clinical research. When they hear research, they may just think, mice in a lab, or something with chemicals. They don't know that there's a really important connection before drugs, devices, and therapeutics, make it to, our hospitals or our pharmacies to help people, that there is a connection between, yes, we, discovered something works in a lab, but how do we get to the point where, we can use it? And that's where clinical research comes in. And I think that, again, there's a huge knowledge gap there, but I know a lot of companies are starting to do more education, both at the high school level, middle school level, and at undergraduate universities. I know I've worked for some companies that have a clinical research ambassador program where they want to go and educate students that this is a possible career option. It may not be one that you are familiar with, right, but is certainly very important. So I think the more people are educated about those opportunities out there, the more interest we'll start to see in it.
So true. And that's part of one of my goals, what I'm hoping to accomplish with things like this, is to just expose people to the clinical research side and all the opportunities that are within the field. Because, I reached out to you about the CRA position specifically because that's kind of my focus. But there's so much more, and there's so many different positions within the field. So I totally agree. And hopefully things like this will help kind of, fill that gap. But back to your story. So you had the research assistant position. And was this with a pharma or CRO or site? What type of company was this with?
It was with a CRO. And so we supported government sponsored trials. So I've worked with both government industry-sponsored trials, which definitely differences across the two. But in that role, I think I really got exposed to a lot of the different tasks that come along with clinical research and some of the different positions. And I felt very fortunate because as an entry-level position, it really gave me the opportunity to gain some experience across different areas. And what I mean by that was there was that was the first step as a research assistant, but working with the CRO, there were opportunities to move into other types of positions. For a while, I was a project specialist. I worked in support of as a data coordinator. There was a period where I worked in quality assurance. And so I was able to get a lot of valuable experience about some of the different areas, even within clinical research, and had the opportunity to decide if I wanted to move next to an in-house CRA role or a monitoring CRA role, a travel CRA role. And so that was an important part in my career because I think it was a tough choice to make.
Mm-hmm. And before we move into that, you mentioned that there is a difference between government and the other type of sponsored trials. So do you mind expanding on that, the differences between the two, just to share that with people?
Sure. So most of my experience, my therapeutic area experience, is in oncology. And so for the first few years of my career, I supported government-sponsored trials. So the government actually, through NIH and for oncology, through the National Cancer Institute, or NCI, funds a lot of research across the country. And the way research works is a little bit different with government-sponsored trials. And that was a huge opportunity in terms of getting that experience. There's also, I think, what more people think of, but we refer to as industry-sponsored trials. So in this case, the government is funded by a biotech or pharma company, and that's more in the private sector. And if you're working at a clinical site, most clinical sites work with both NIH government-sponsored trials and pharma industry-sponsored trials, but there are some nuances and differences to how they work.
Okay. And would you say that one side is better than the other, or is it just different?
I'd say each side has their pluses and minuses. They definitely play a key role in the research industry in general. I'd say I've enjoyed working on the industry side because there's a little bit more flexibility for innovation and things like that. But the government side, because of the way government contracting works, it's simplified in some ways, not as difficult to maybe run a government-sponsored trial because there's more standardization, whereas on the industry side, you have so many different sponsors, from one pharma company to the next, that what systems they use, how their protocols are written, how they run their trials, what their data entry expectations are, can differ wildly just from one company to another.
That's true. Okay, so back to, you said you held several positions within that company, and it sounds like you kind of worked your way up. Did you have a plan in order to kind of move to those different levels, or did that just kind of naturally happen?
Well, a lot of those positions were lateral positions for me. They gave me opportunities to build my skill set, which was really important. But I had reached a point I realized that I was ready to move up. And unfortunately, with that company that I was with, there weren't any positions available to me that would allow me to move up without having to wait, 5, 7, 8 years. Okay. I knew I was at a point where I was ready to move to the next level. So at that time, I was offered the ability to get CRA training as a travel monitor. And at the point I was in my life.
Not to interrupt you, but how many years at this point are you into your career?
4.5 years.
Okay.
Yeah. So about 4.5 years into my career. And I had the opportunity to go to CRA Training Academy. It would have taken 2 years to get my full CRA training. So 1 year of training, and then there's like another year at that company that allowed me to I guess, monitor with training wheels, you could say.
Oh, wow.
And 2-year mark, I would be considered a clinical research associate, kind of level 1 at that company.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and I'll say, and I think this is a trend, and I get questions a lot about, how difficult it is to get CRA training. At the time, it was very difficult. I've seen over the years, some companies are more willing to train entry-level staff as CRAs. Other companies, they may not have academy or bridge programs available. So I've definitely seen the availability go up and down over the last 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
But at that point, I did have the opportunity to go into a CRA training academy, but I declined, actually.
Oh, wow. And
yeah.
And I said, wow, when you mentioned that it was a 2-year program, because nowadays with the larger CROs, especially, the longest I've heard is like maybe 12 to 16 weeks. And then you're out there. They may allow you to do some co-monitoring, but for me personally, my program was 6 to 8 weeks. So within that 6 weeks, I was out on a visit by myself, and it was terrifying. So I think it's interesting that, that they designed it to, you said the first year was kind of like training, and then the second year was kind of like monitoring the training rules. I think that's pretty cool, because it really does take you about 2 years to even kind of not feel like you're drowning every day. So that's cool. But you declined. So
I did.
Share more about that. It's so hard to get in, and here you are. You have this opportunity that people are dying for, and then you decline.
Yeah, I did. And I go back and forth even now about, should I have taken that opportunity? What would my career path have looked like if I had? But at the time, the idea of traveling as much as the position required was not ideal.
Yeah.
Had family. I was getting married. I wanted to start a family, and the idea of having to travel every week, in some instances twice a week, depending on the needs of the sponsor, was a challenge for me.
Yeah.
And as much, had that gotten that opportunity a year or two before that, I think I would have gone for it. I definitely would have been excited to do it. But I love to travel personally, pre-pandemic, but at that time, for me personally, it wasn't the best choice for me. And so I walked away from that offer to kind of go through that training with that company. And, but I knew that my career was stagnant in my current role. So I started applying outside the company and received an offer for an in-house CRA position as a centralized monitor.
Nice. And I think it's so important to kind of point out the fact that you made a choice that was based upon what was best for you and in the life that you wanted to create and have for yourself, right? Because I get so many people that reach out and they want to be a regional monitor, but they don't want to travel, or they want to only do like local driving distance travel. And although those positions are out there, like you said, it's not common. And then for me, like sometimes I've flown out on a Sunday and I didn't get back until even a Saturday. And I come back home, I don't even really unpack my bag. I'll like change out the dirty clothes, throw in some new ones, and then I'm back on the road that Sunday or Monday. And it's not like that every single week. But you do have those weeks. And then there's weeks where I was in 4 cities in 1 week, and those are the worst. Because I like to travel too, but I think most people don't realize that it's not like personal travel. This is like you just fly in the city, you monitor, and then you fly to the next one. Like no time to really explore or navigate the area. And sometimes you do have those opportunities to kind of explore, but for the most part, you don't. And I think that's very important to kind of point out. And I think it's great that you were so kind of aware of yourself and the life that you wanted to establish that you were able to make that decision. You said you kind of struggle with it, but without hesitation, doing what's best for you, without being concerned about, hey, will I ever get this opportunity again? And then you found the in-house role. And that was one of the reasons why I loved your story, because you can be a CRA, regional traveling CRA, but then you can be an in-house CRA and have just as wonderful, lucrative, amazing career. And that's what you've done. So tell us a little bit more about that. Once you got the in-house role, and was it with a CRO or pharma company, and how did it kind of develop from there?
Sure. Yeah. So I was really excited to accept the in-house CRA position. While I had a lot of opportunities to wear a lot of different hats and with the prior CRO I was with, I think I had gotten to a point where I was stagnant. I was getting comfortable in the company and in myself and in the roles that I had. And I was afraid, honestly, to leave. That was a big fear for me. I felt almost like a loyalty to the company and the team and the projects that I worked on. And that level of being comfortable was difficult to leave behind. But I accepted that offer at a new CRO. But this time, the trials that we were supporting were industry-sponsored trials through a pharma company. And it was new. It was exciting. I had to learn the nuances of the industry side versus the government side. But the in-house CRA position gave me a lot more insight into a lot of the work that the CRA does, but kind of shifting to what you're able to do remotely or not having to go on site. So I know the in-house CRA role from colleagues over the years, and seeing what it's like at different CROs may vary. But a lot of the core tasks can really be the same in terms of monitoring and ensuring compliance with regulatory and ethical things.
Right. And it's so refreshing to hear you share about your fears to leave, because a lot of people don't talk about that. And I have so many clients who I have to basically push, almost force them to go to the next phase or the next job. And it's kind of like the unspoken thing. But you do, especially it seems like women even more so than men. But you feel a sense of loyalty, especially if you've been there for a while and you've gotten comfort and, you knew it was a stagnant situation, but at the same time, it was still like, but I don't know, should I leave? But you were still willing to make that leap of faith. I think that's so wonderful and so amazing. Now, would you say that the previous roles at the other company, as a research assistant and the quality roles, would you say that they really helped prepare you for that in-house CRA role? Or do you think you could have went directly into the in-house CRA role from school, from college, with that same level of, I guess, foundation or base and still been as successful?
So I'll say that, do I think I could have gone into the in-house CRA role directly from college? Probably not. Having like a clinical trial associate or clinical research assistant type role really helped give me a lot of the information training that I didn't have in terms of just understanding the breadth of knowledge that clinical research covers. But what I will say is I didn't need 4.5 years. I stayed at that CRO for 4.5 years, and I got a lot of other experience from other roles. But I probably could have left after 1 year and moved directly into the in-house CRA role. And that was something that was really important for me to learn early on. One, that if I feel comfortable, real comfortable, that's usually a sign I need to start looking to push myself a bit more. And two, not to be afraid to, because I held on for 4.5 years, and I do not regret the experiences that I got. But I should not have been afraid of pushing myself and to apply for jobs that are out there just because I either had it in my mind, oh, well, maybe once I get to 5 years experience, I'll be qualified for this.
Right.
No, I don't think that's the case. I think as women, sometimes we don't have the confidence in ourselves to put ourselves there. Mm-hmm. And I really encourage people who are in the field to apply for those jobs, even if you don't think you're qualified. You know, you put something in your head, or someone else has put something in your head that, oh, well, you don't meet these qualifications, or if you really wanted to be competitive, you should have A, B, and C. I think it's well worth the risk to go ahead and apply and see what happens and have those opportunities and doors open for you that wouldn't if you had never applied at all.
Absolutely. Wow. Such wise words. And then, you know, how long you got the in-house CRA role, how long were you in that position before you moved on to the next?
I was actually in that position for 18 months, and then I moved into a clinical trial manager role. So with the CRO that I moved to, they definitely had more opportunities for growth. They definitely encouraged growth. And that was something I had not had at my last CRO and didn't know was possible. It was really like a culture shock that you could work for a didn't want to stifle your growth, that wanted to encourage your growth. And so I would definitely say I've learned that, you know, some companies are better at that than others. And despite that feeling of loyalty you may have, definitely choose what's best for you in your career, because I think making that choice and that jump to a new CRO was one of the best things I could have done in my career, because it put me in a place that encouraged and supported my growth and allowed me to move into a management position after 18 months.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's part of the reason that I needed people to hear your story, because people think that you have to be a regional traveling monitor in order to get those management, CTM, project manager, those type of roles. And it's not true. You don't have to be a traveling monitor to move up. So what a position just so happen to open up, or had you kind of discussed it with your line manager previously? Share with us how you were able to transition so quickly, really.
Yeah. So I think every year during review time, you know, you talk with your managers about what are your goals, right, and setting those goals. And with some companies, you may have more frequent check-ins with your manager, you know, about your day-to-day work. But I think regardless of the timing, you know, whether it's during your one-on-one sessions with your manager or during your end-of-year review and next year review planning meetings, communicate what you want. Let your manager know. And there's ways to do that, but I think being direct is always the simplest. You know, appreciative for the role that you have currently, certainly, but companies want people who want more, who want to learn more, who want to be challenged. And so if you meet with your manager and every time you meet with him or her, you tell them, yeah, things are going great. They're going to think, okay, things are going great. You know, I need to help you. I don't need to help you find something new. You know, and line managers, I've had a lot of line managers over the years. I've had some really great ones. I had some ones that are more hands-off and not involved. They're there to guide you, make sure you're productive, but also make sure you're happy in your role if they're doing their job right. And so communicating your needs, your wants, your goals with your line manager is really important. And asking them, you know, if my goal is to move into this role, what do you think would help me do that? You know, should I go out for more projects? You know, take on a leadership role in my current role? Is there a certification or maybe training I can take on my own time that would help me with that? And just communicating that with your manager lets them know that that's something that you're interested in and pursuing. And a lot of times managers will be in resourcing meetings or other meetings where roles and positions come up, and you want your name to be the one that's at the front of their mind when those opportunities come up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, wow. You did it. You made it to the, you made it from, in-house CRA. You didn't have to travel, right? And then now you're in a management role. So share more about that. And, the difference between that and then the CRA role, because I'll get those questions too. They don't, people don't want to travel forever, but they feel like maybe if they go in-house, then they might have to take a pay cut. But then they're kind of scared to go to trial management, project management, even line management because of the responsibilities and the duties and things of that nature. So share a little bit more about that role.
Yeah, I think whether you're coming from an in-house CRA role or a regional monitor that travels, a traveling CRA role, a lot of the tasks that you're doing in your role directly apply to clinical trial management or even line management level positions. It's just taking it a step further. So in my in-house CRA position, I was delegated a lot of task management, individual tasks and site-specific information that I was responsible for. And I would report to a clinical trial manager who had ultimately responsibility to ensure those tasks got done. And so when I moved into the clinical trial manager position, it just took my existing tasks a step further. So now I was responsible for making sure those tasks that I used to do in the past and understood how to do really well, and making sure my team, had what they needed to be successful in support of the trial or the project. And I have a lot of colleagues who were travel CRAs. They had direct site management experience, and that translates really well into trial management experience. So I think I encourage people, who feel like, well, I may not be qualified or this might be something more challenging. A lot of the skills that you develop in those roles directly apply to the clinical trial management or clinical operations management positions. It's just taking it a step further.
Yep. Totally agree. Wow. Okay. So now you're, a trial manager, you're in this role. What next? What did you decide to kind of transition into next?
Well, at that point, so I was working for the CRO still in support of the pharma company that we supported their trials for. And a lot of CROs or people who have experience with CROs make the jump from the CRO to the sponsor side of things and go back and forth over their career based on, their. So at that point in time, there were direct hire positions with the sponsor that we supported available. And I applied to kind of move over there in a clinical operations manager role. And that was a big jump, even though I was working with the same people. I was no longer on the CRO side. I was going to be on the sponsor side of things. So there was some good and familiarity with what I was doing there. But that was a big change, moving over to the sponsor side and getting that perspective. So at that point in my career, I made the jump to work for the sponsor.
And would you say one is better than the other, or which of course they both probably have pros and cons, but in comparison, what would you say you prefer, CRO side or sponsor side, and kind of like, I guess, share some of the challenges with both, and then the kind of the pros with both sides?
Well, I'll be honest, the pros for the sponsor side, the pay and the benefits were better. That's definitely a big pull for me. And I think with the sponsor side, you have a little bit, in my experience, freedom and ability to kind of put forth ideas and maybe facilitate change in how things are done, at least on the operations side. When I was working on the sponsor side, that was certainly encouraged. And I've worked with a couple other CROs, and I have colleagues that do, and that may vary from one sponsor to another. Some CROs have a relationship with a sponsor where they want you to do your work, do it well, and that's it. But you may not always feel comfortable, sharing your opinions or suggesting innovative ideas or ways to kind of bring about process change and continuous improvement. On the CRO side, I think some of the real great benefits are the line management support is really built to make sure you're happy and that you're doing well. Because if you're not doing well, then the company does not reflect well to the sponsor. And so I think there's a big support system, and the line management that I've had with CROs has been pretty well in the experience that I have. And I think the difference that I see varies even from CRO to sponsor is the amount of flexibility you have to move from role to role. I've certainly heard that some sponsors don't allow as much flexibility to move into other positions outside of your group. But I've heard the same thing with CROs and vice versa. I've heard some CROs allow you to move to other projects, apply to positions within, and have that flexibility for growth. And I've heard the same thing for sponsors. So I think that variability is certainly there, and it's dependent on the sponsor or the CRO.
True. Okay, so now you've made that successful transition to the other side, which I guess it kind of varies. Some people say they seem to have a major challenge with transitioning over. Some people seem to do it more smoothly or easily than others. But now you're over on the sponsor side. You said you were a clinical operations manager, right? So kind of share some of those, responsibilities, like what did your typical day consist of, the types of tasks or responsibilities within that particular role?
Sure. So that was largely a project management type role in that position. And a lot of my responsibilities were running reports and managing oversight for project tasks, running meetings. Specifically in study startup, there was a big emphasis there, and ensuring the regulatory for the country operations was where it needed to be. Reporting is a big part of it, whereas I think in the in-house CRA role or the CRA roles, reporting is certainly important, but maybe specific to one study or one site. When you start to move into some of the other management type roles, you have to have almost a 50,000-foot view of what's going on, and be able to look across the study or from site to site, or in some cases, country to country.
Yeah, true. And then so from there, from that particular position, share with us a little bit more about your career and where, it went from there up until now, really.
Well, I think in between there, I got my master's, which when I look back on it, I have no regrets. I'm glad I did it, but trying to go to graduate school, have a family, and work full time is a lot. My mother always, yes, I have. It was a lot, and I was doing a lot when I look back on it. But my mother was very supportive of me and my family. And there were some nights where I was just tired and wondering why am I doing this? Why am I doing this? And I enjoyed the program and I loved it, but it's a lot to juggle. I did it. It took me 3.5 years. I took summers off. I did part-time one semester. I had my daughter in the middle of it, and it was a lot, but it was something I did for me, which I think I needed. And also, after talking to some mentors that I've had over the years, they really encouraged me to go back to school and get a master's. And I went back and forth between a master's in public health or a master's in clinical research or healthcare administration. And I think all of those options are really great. And there's a lot of great programs out there that support working professionals. But the one bit of advice that a mentor shared with me was that if you start to look at the jobs that you want one day, look what qualifications they have. And a lot of the jobs that I was interested in didn't require a master's per se, but in lieu of a master's, they wanted you to have maybe 3 to 5 years additional experience. Mm-hmm. And so I had to look at that as a trade-off. I could not go back to school and just maybe work a few years longer to maybe offset that. Or I could go back to school and deal with the late nights and, homework on the weekends, and hopefully up my chances when I apply to a position that I wanted. So that was, I think, a big part of it. Mm-hmm. And when time came, I applied to an associate director position on the pharma side, and I got the job. And I had doubted myself. I wasn't sure I was qualified. At that point, I had about 9 years experience.
And it's funny, I hate to interrupt you, but I have to say, I have to point this out, because you, at this point, you've held all these amazing roles and you still doubted yourself.
Yes. The doubt is very real. I read an article years ago about something called imposter syndrome, where you feel like, they're going to find out. They're going to, I don't know. That is something I still deal with even now.
Me too. It's crazy that you say that, because I'm like, not you. Definitely not you, Mary. But wow, because I deal with that too. And I even, this is something that I even have in my program in the mindset module. We talk about all these types of things. And it's crazy that you struggle with the doubt. Wow. Okay. Wow.
Yeah. But I applied, and I was not going to apply. When this position opened up, the associate director position opened up, my husband encouraged me to apply, my mother, my friends, and I had so many doubts in my mind. I was like, why would they want me in this role? Part of it was I had this mindset that I had to overcome of what I thought a person in that role should look like or should be like.
That's true.
Because I would see people who had a certain background, who had like 18 years experience, who had worked as a nurse or a site coordinator, and had this completely different background than me in terms of everything. And I was like, well, no, why would they hire me? That doesn't make sense. Why am I wasting my time applying? And I did. And I'm glad I did, because getting over those self-doubts is hard, but very important, because you cases will be the person who's keeping yourself back because you're afraid or you're down.
Absolutely. And when you said, why would they hire me? In my mind, I'm thinking, why would they not?
That's what your family, your friends, people who know you, they will hype you up. They will tell you how wonderful you are. And like, not me. You're talking about somebody else.
That is so funny. And I'm so glad you're sharing this, because somebody in your role now, an associate director, to think that you even still deal with some of the same struggles that the people that are just, trying to get their first position in the industry, the same things that they're struggling with, to hear somebody like you say that, it has to be encouraging. I know it's encouraging for me, because I'm like, if you can feel that way, I definitely need to not be so hard on myself, because I'm like that about everything. And you're right. I'm like, my parents support me, my husband, all these other friends. And it's like, no, that you're just saying that because you love me. You don't really know what's going on. Wow. That's so awesome. So now you're an associate director at one of the largest pharma companies in the entire world. How does that feel now? What are your responsibilities now versus when you were in that in-house CRA role? And how do you think having that role prepared you for where you are now?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely think that all the roles that I'd had prior to this role were important because they gave me insight into understanding and having empathy with the challenges that different positions face. In the position that I'm currently in, I have to lead and work with teams at different levels in different areas of the study and the project. And having that empathy and understanding of where someone's coming from, so understanding, what the challenges of an in-house CRA role, what the challenges of a CRA or a clinical operations manager's role is. That has helped me a lot. And I've certainly done some of this task, so I understand the role, but I also understand the people who are in that role who make up my team. And having that empathy, I think, is very, very important, because the more you can understand and empathize with someone, the easier it is to connect and build that trust that is important when you're leading a team.
Absolutely. Wow. So if there was, I guess, one piece of advice, or maybe it's not even one thing, maybe it's a few things that you would share with someone, just at the beginning of their career, maybe they're a research assistant, maybe they're a study coordinator, maybe they just freshly graduated out of college and they're trying to get, something. What would be like that one main piece of advice, or, 2 or 3 points, but that you would say is key to their success?
So, when I think about that question, I have people that reach out to me through friends or colleagues at work who are trying to understand, what should they do next with their career? How should they look for the position? And I'd say the first thing I tell people is don't get discouraged. Mm-hmm. I applied to, I think I had a spreadsheet of over 50 individual research positions when I was first trying to get in. And that was hard. Getting into an entry-level role was difficult. Shadowing and talking to people and just upping the numbers of jobs I applied to helped me get one job. Yeah. But that was discouraging early on. So I tell people, don't be discouraged. The job for you will be there. And maybe you didn't get that job you thought you wanted, but the one that is for you is out there. And I think that's important to think about. And then once you're in the industry, explore it and don't get too comfortable. Being comfortable is, I think, a blessing and a curse. I know when I'm in a position and I feel comfortable, I feel like, I know this job. I can do this in my sleep. And people come to me because they know, she knows how to do it. That's usually a sign that I need to move on. I need to challenge myself, whether that's with the same company or with the new one. And don't let those doubts, that imposter syndrome, that belief that you're not qualified or that you have some loyalty that you owe somebody or something somewhere. Don't let that hold you back for doing what's best for you.
Absolutely. Wow. Very, very, very wise words. So I guess in a nutshell, if you could, I guess, how do I want to put this? If you could summarize like your entire career from beginning to end, and in one word, I'll give you even 3 because maybe that'll be too challenging or too difficult. What would you say? What word or words would you use to summarize your entire experience? Because you've shared some challenges, you've shared some doubts and fears and all that stuff. But overall, it sounds amazing, at least from my end. So what word would you use to describe or summarize your entire experience?
I'd say hope. I think hope does that nicely. At every step in my career, I've had to have hope. Will have hope for me sometimes when I didn't have hope for myself. And I think that is also very key. You have to believe in yourself and push yourself and have that hope that, you will get that experience or get that knowledge or get that position that you're looking for. but also building a network of people around you to have hope for you, because sometimes you won't, whether it's family or mentors. I've had a lot of great mentors over the years in formal mentoring programs and informal mentors. Build that network of people that will have hope for you and that know that you are amazing and that can help you, because you'll definitely need them at times when you are thinking about applying for that job but don't want to. They'll encourage you. They'll have hope for you. They will hype you up and be like, you know what, you got this. And if they don't choose you, that's okay, because they're missing out. You need that.
Wow. And we didn't really, go in depth on this, but I've heard you say several times support from your family. And you have a spouse, you have at least one child you mentioned. And I get this question so many times from women feeling like they can't have a successful career and a family at the same time. But you've managed to do it all. And not only that, while getting your MPH, right? So, before you go, if you could just, I guess, share some encouraging words or, a piece of advice for those women out there and even men that may be feeling like they won't be able to have both. What would you, share or say to those people?
I would say it's definitely about balance. There were times in my career where I felt stagnant. I wanted to do something else. I wanted to take on more, but I knew because of what was going on with my family, whether it's parents or my husband or my kids, that it just wasn't a good time. And in some instances it wasn't, and I had to pass on an opportunity, or wait or delay, maybe applying to another role until, next year. And I had to make what decision was best for me, but with the understanding that the time would come and not to get discouraged about that. And then conversely, talking to your family, for this director position, I did not think it was a good time to apply. I said, with my daughter starting school and the support that she needed, and my son was very small, I had parents that weren't well, there was a lot going on. I had to talk to my husband and be honest and say, is this something that we can swing? Because this would be more responsibility for me. And in the future, I might have to travel a little bit more. And he was very supportive, and kind of having that discussion so that they know, okay, I'm going to go for it. Yeah. But if I get it, I need your help. I need your support,
Yeah.
I'm going to need you to be there for me right now, because the first couple of months are tough. So, the people in your life, they love you, your friends, your family. Have those conversations, make sure that support is there, but don't get discouraged if the timing's not right, because the time will come.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. If my husband didn't support me, I don't know what I would do. I probably wouldn't even be able to do the job. And then, now I'm venturing out and starting a business, and he supports me regardless of what crazy idea I come up with. So yeah, I would say that that's been key for me too, because there's definitely times where I was exactly like you, doubting myself even today. And he's always right there, just talking me off the ledge. Yeah. So, wow. Well, any final words, one last thought you want to leave everyone with?
I would say don't be afraid to reach out for a mentor. You can't do it alone. You don't know everything. I don't know everything. I've gained a lot of insight from that. Whether that's someone, in a position that you want to be in one day, or someone in a lateral role, there's a lot that you can gain from talking and networking with other people and building those relationships. And I've had a couple of mentors over the years that have given me a lot of insight into myself. Asked me some really hard questions that maybe I wasn't asking myself. So I definitely encourage people, whether that's in a formal mentoring setting. I know some companies have that, where they'll set you up with a mentor, or an informal mentoring session, just reaching out to people. Because I think more people are open to that than you think. Don't be afraid to, reach out to people, build those connections. Those are really important.
Well, thank you, Mary, so much for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.